And welcome back to my channel aqknowledgeentertainment. In my previous tutorial, I told you about the plant tissue, and in this tutorial, I'm going to tell you about the animal tissue. Okay, so if you haven't watched the previous tutorial about the plant tissue, so make sure to go and watch it. I have also given it in the I button right here, or also the link in the description if I remember, because I usually forget things. Okay, so before getting into it, as usual, make sure to like, share and subscribe, okay, and also ring the bell icon to get my latest notifications first. So guys, let's get into it.
So guys, first of all, the animal tissue is basically divided into 4 types of animal tissues. Okay, so the first type is epithelial tissue, the second one the nervous tissue, the third one the muscular tissue, and the last but not the least the connective tissue. Okay, so first let's talk something. Let me explain you all something about the epithelial tissue. Now, what are these epithelial tissues, right? So the covering or protective tissue in the animal body are the epithelial tissue. Okay, epithelial covers most organs, okay, and cavities within the body. It also forms a barrier to keep different body systems separate. Now, what does barrier mean? Barrier means something which prevents or stops or stands between, something like that. Okay, so it acts as a barrier to keep different body systems separate. Okay, now epithelial tissue cells are tightly packed and form a continuous sheet. They have only a small amount of cementing material between them, and they do not have intercellular space. Then I can't say that they do not have, they don't almost, they and almost no, they have almost no intercellular space. Okay, now first of all, let me tell you there are 3 types of epithelial tissues: squamous epithelial, columnar epithelial, and cuboidal epithelial. So what does these do? So different epithelia show different structures that correlate with their unique functions. For example, in cells lining blood vessels or lung alveoli, where transportation of substances occur through a selectively permeable surface, this is a simple flat kind of epithelium. Okay, this is called the simple squamous epithelium. Okay, so this is called the simple squamous epithelium. Now, these simple squamous epithelium cells are extremely thin and flat and form a delicate lining. So these cells are very flat and thin, so they form a very delicate lining. Okay, so that was about the first type of the simple squamous epithelium. Okay, so now what does the second type do? Means the stratified squamous epithelial. What does it do? The skin which protects the body is also made of squamous epithelial. Skin epithelial cells are arranged in many layers to prevent wear and tear. Since they are arranged in a pattern of layers, the epithelial is called stratified squamous epithelial tissue. Okay, so I hope you have understand these two, that's the simple squamous and the stratified squamous. Now let's move to, before getting into the next epithelial tissue, first of all let me tell you the squamous epithelial squamous epithelial tissue's location. So the location is the skin, okay, the lining of the mouth, the skin, the lining of the mouth, the lining of blood vessels, lungs, lung alveoli, and kidney tubules. Okay, so these are the places where the squamous epithelial tissues are present. It may be simple squamous or stratified squamous. Now the second type of epithelial tissue is the columnar tissue. Now what are these? So let me tell you all what are these. Where absorption and secretion occurs as in the inner lining of the intestine, tall epithelial cells are present. Now what are these tall ones? You're exactly right. They are the columnar epithelial tissue. Now what does columnar means? If you take the meaning of columnar, it actually means pillar like. So why are they called so? Because the cells of the columnar tissue are long. Okay, they are long. Now epithelium facilitates movement across the epithelial barrier. In the respiratory tract, the columnar epithelial tissue also has cilia. Now, what is cilia? Cilia are hair-like projections on the outer surface of the epithelial cells. Okay, these cilia can move and their movement pushes the mucus forward to clear it. Okay, hope you understand that. This type of epithelium is thus called ciliated columnar epithelium. Now what is the other name of columnar epithelium? So it's also called the ciliated columnar epithelium. Okay, so now let's move on to the third. So before getting into the third type, let me tell you the location of the columnar. It's basically the inner lining of stomach. Okay, so now let's move on to the cuboidal. Now what are these? Cuboidal epithelium. Now why are they called cuboidal? Because they have a cube shape. Okay, cube shaped cells. So the cuboidal epithelium forms the lining of kidney tubules and ducts of salivary glands where it provides mechanical support. So the epithelial tissue which provides the mechanical support, it's probably the cuboidal epithelial tissue. Okay, so epithelial cells are often acquired. So epithelial cells often acquire additional specializations as gland cells. Okay, so you can see here they are present in the salivary glands and the sweat glands. So they have gland cells which can secrete substances at the epithelial surface. Sometimes a portion of the multicellular gland is formed. Now what is multicellular? Multicellular means many cells. Okay, multicellular. So what's the meaning of multi? Multi means many. Cellular or cells means the cell. So unicellular means single cell, multicellular means many cells. Okay, so multicellular gland is formed. Now this is glandular epithelium. So now cuboidal epithelium can be also called as glandular epithelium. Okay, so this is a point to remember. So now we finished the epithelial tissue. Hope you have understood everything about it. And if you haven't understood anything, even a small topic, please comment me down below, because asking queries is not a problem. Okay, and I will try to reply to each of the queries. Okay, so now let's move on to the nervous tissue. That's the second type of animal tissue. Now what are nervous tissue? So let me tell you all what are the nervous tissue. So all cells possess the ability to respond to a stimuli. Now what's a stimuli? Stimuli is a thing or event that awakes a specific functional reaction in a organ or tissue. So in an organ or a tissue. So however, the cells of the nervous tissue are highly specialized for being stimulated and then transmitting the stimulus very rapidly from one place to another within the body. The brain, spinal cord and nerves are all composed of the nervous tissue. Now let me tell you an example of the nervous tissue. What does it do? The function of it. Now for example, there's a candle blowing. Okay, now we don't see that candle, but by mistake or something happens, we put our finger or we put our hand on the candle. So when you start feeling it, not even a second, even less than a second, we just remove our hand. Now why does that happen? Even if you don't know, your hand gets off of the fire. Now why does this happen? Because this is the work of the nervous tissue, because if there was no nervous tissue, we cannot feel anything. So the feeling sense probably comes from the nervous tissue. Okay, so it responds to the stimuli, so it sends the information from the place where the stimuli is there to the brain, and the brain again gives the information back. Okay, so the location of nervous tissue is brain, spinal cord, and nerves. So, and this is an important point right here. The nervous tissue cells transfers information from the axon, okay, from the axon to the dendrite. So you should remember this point. It is very important because many of us think that from dendrite to axon or axon to dendrite is the same. No, keep thinking or put that thought in your mind that it transfers information only from the axon to the dendrite. Okay, so make sure you remember this point. Okay, so that was only about the nervous tissue. Now let me show you actually a diagram of it so you will understand it more better. So here you can see I have got the diagrams of the epithelial tissue and the neuron tissue, that nervous tissue, also the muscle tissue, but I will tell you that later. But first let's see the epithelial tissue and the nervous tissue. So the nervous tissue cells are also called the neuron. Okay, the cells of the what do you say, this nervous tissue is also called the neurons. Okay, so this, you can see the structure of the neuron. Just a minute, let me just annotate and show you all. Yeah, see here you can see these are the dendrites. You can see these branch type structures. So these from here to here. So these are all the dendrites right here, here. So these. So what I said you before, they take the information from the axon and they give it out to from the dendrite. So the information basically comes from, oh my god, just a minute. Okay, so the information basically comes from here and goes out from here. Okay, so this is an important point, as I said you before. So that was that. So now let's see the diagram of the epithelial tissue. Now you can see, before I told the cuboidal, so you can see the diagram clearly right here. So you can see the cells are cubed structures, so that's why they are called the cuboidal. And simple squamous is a flat and thin layer, as you can see right here. And the stratified, okay, stratified squamous epithelial tissue, which prevents the wear and tear of the skin. So that is why you can see there are many layers in the stratified squamous epithelial. The last one but not the least, the simple columnar. So as I said you earlier, they are long structures. Okay, they are long, and you can see that the nucleus is located at the bottom, not at the center but at the bottom. So you can see they are long in structure. Okay, so now let's go back to the, yeah, so this one. So now let's talk about the muscular tissues. Now when we talk something about the muscular tissues, now what do you understand by muscles? Muscular or muscles, right? So muscles, obviously they are something which help in the movement, so which are attached to the bone, that obviously everyone of us know, right? Yeah, so the muscular tissues are of two types. They are voluntary muscles and involuntary muscles. Now why are they given two different types? Let me tell you. Because the voluntary muscles are the muscles which can be, what do you say, controlled by us. Now for example, if we are sitting on a chair, we just want to get up and go somewhere, so it's on us if we want to sit, keep sitting, or go out here, there. So it depends on us, right? So we can do anything like we can move it ourselves. So the voluntary muscles are the muscles which can be controlled. Now there is only one type of voluntary muscles, that are skeletal muscles. Now let me tell you why are they called skeletal muscles. Muscles present in our limbs move when we want them to, right, and stop when we so decide. Such muscles are called voluntary muscles, as been I told you earlier. So these muscles are also called skeletal muscles, as they are mostly attached to bones and help in a body movement. Now I think you have understood why they are called skeletal muscles. Okay, now let me tell you again, they are called skeletal muscles because they are attached to our bones. Okay, now these skeletal muscles have alternate high and dark bands on them. Okay, now this helps, the skeletal muscles help in maintaining the posture. So okay, here as I wrote the note right here, that helps in maintaining the posture. So that was only about the voluntary muscles. Now let's move on to the involuntary muscles. Now what do you mean by involuntary? It's exactly opposite to the voluntary. The voluntary muscles were which we could control, but these involuntary muscles are the muscles which cannot be controlled. Now you may be wondering, are there really muscles that which cannot be controlled? It's yes. So there are two types of them, smooth muscles and cardiac muscles. So let me tell you first about the smooth muscles. The movement of food in the alimentary canal of the contraction and relaxation of the blood vessels are involuntary movements, means the movements which cannot be controlled by us, right? So we cannot really start them or stop them simply by wanting to do so. That is why smooth muscles or involuntary muscles control such movements, because we can't control them, so the smooth muscles do the work for us. Okay, so the smooth muscles basically helps in the movement of food and blood. Okay, now this was about the smooth muscles. Okay, just before getting into it, the cardiac muscles, let me tell you, the cells of the smooth muscles are long with pointed ends, that is spindle shaped, and uninucleate, that means having a single nucleus. Okay, they are also called unstrained muscles. So remember this. What's the other name of smooth muscles? They are called the unstrained muscles. So now let's move on to the cardiac muscles. Now what do you understand by the word cardiac? Basically something related to our heart, right? Obviously right, because these cardiac muscles help in the working of the heart. So what does this actually do? The muscles of the heart show the rhythmic contraction and relaxation throughout the life, which we cannot control, right? So that is why they are called the involuntary muscles. So the cardiac muscles basically makes the heart working. It relaxes and contracts 24/7, so it keeps working the whole life. Okay, so that is why the cardiac muscle is a separate type of muscle which is only for the heart. Okay, now which works to keep the heart working. So this was about the muscular tissue. Now let me tell you about the connective tissues. 1 minute. Yeah, so now what are connective tissues? By the term connective, what do you understand by connective? Obviously something which connects, right? So you're exactly right. So connective tissues are those tissues which connect different parts of our body. It may be parts or organs or etc. Okay, so now let's move on to the connective tissue, but before going into it, just see the diagram of the muscle tissue types. So you can see the top right corner, smooth muscle tissues, cardiac muscle tissues, and skeletal muscle tissues. Okay, so now let's move on to the, I hope you have seen it. So let's move on to the connective tissues. Now this connective tissues is the tissue which have the maximum types in it. Now till now every tissue including the plant tissues, okay, every tissue had maybe 2 or 3 maximum types, but this connective tissue has 7 types. Okay, they have 7 types of connective tissues. There are 7 types. Now what are those? They are blood, bone, ligament, tendon, cartilage, areola tissue, and adipose tissue. So let's talk about the blood. Now when you hear the word blood as a connective tissue, now you may be having a doubt, right? It's just a fluid. How can it acts as a connective tissue? Now let me tell you how. The blood flows to transport oxygen, food, hormones, and waste materials and so on. So by doing this, they do the work of different parts. So basically we can say that they connect different parts, right? So now this blood, okay, is made up of 3, that is the red blood cells, WBC, that's the white blood cells, and the platelets. Now we can't just say directly red blood cells or white blood cells, we can actually say, but there's a different scientific name of each. Okay, so that is the erythros. Okay, erythros for the red blood cells, leukocytes, erythrocytes, sorry, for the red blood cells is the erythrocytes, for the WBC the white blood cells, leukocytes, and platelets are also called thrombocytes. So first let me tell you something about the red blood cells. Now why do you think they are called red blood cells? Because they contain hemoglobin, which gives them the color red color. So that's why they are also called the red blood cells. Now what do these red blood cells do? We obviously know that from before. So they transport oxygen, and this is the main point which we should keep in mind, that the lifespan or the span, whatever, I think I wrote it wrong, so is 120 days. So every red blood cell lives for 120 days, not exactly, but average is 120 days. So this is an important point. Okay, now what does the white blood cells do, or the leukocytes do? Obviously they are related for the defense, right? We know it from before. Now the last one but not the least, again, the platelets, which work to stop the blood flowing out. Now for example, we have a cut on our body, anywhere, wherever it is. So if we have a cut, our blood does not keep flowing and keep flowing. There comes a time where after some time it stops flowing out. Now why does this happen? Exactly just because of the platelets, because these platelets help the blood to not go out. Okay, now before moving on to the bone tissue, let me tell you all that white blood cells are again divided into 5 types based on their nucleus. Okay, so the first type is neutrophils, the second basophils, third eosinophils, fourth monocytes, and the fifth is lymphocytes. Okay, now neutrophils are of 3 to 7 looped nucleus. So what do you think by looped? Loop means joint. Okay, so they have a 3 to 7 looped nucleus. Now basophils are S-shaped nucleus basically. So they have an S shape, not exactly S, it may differ, okay, but roughly like S. And eosinophils, 2 loop nucleus, monocyte, bean shaped nucleus, okay, bean shaped nucleus, and lymphocytes, the last one, that has only 1 nucleus but a large one, okay, not a small one but a large one. So you should remember the names of these different types of nucleus, cells of the white blood cells. Now let me show you the diagram. So here you can see the neutrophils right here, 3 to 7 loop nucleus. Okay, now erythrocytes, that the red blood cells which are right here and here, and obviously everywhere around. Okay, and the next is white blood cells. Now you may be thinking, you may be searching for the white blood cells, but these purple structures are the white blood cells. So you can see they have the different names here: neutrophils, eosinophils, basophils, lymphocytes, and monocytes. So see, lymphocyte has a large nucleus, monocytes right here, bean-shaped nucleus, basophils, that's S-shaped, as I said you earlier, not exactly S, so it may differ from cell to cell. Okay, because I don't know from cell to cell, I'm not sure, but yeah, it's not exactly like S. And the eosinophils, two loop nucleus. So here you can see one here and the second one here. So two loop nucleus. And neutrophils, as I said you earlier, 3 to 7 loop nucleus. So now it can have number of nucleus up to 7. Okay, but the minimum of it is 3. Okay, now I hope you have seen that. Now let's just move back. Oh my god. Okay, go back. Yeah, so that was about the blood. Now the next type is the bone. Now obviously we know what is a bone, right? But how can it be a connective tissue? So what do you think? I will tell you how. Because bone forms the framework that supports the body. It also anchors the muscles and support the main organs of the body. So the bone basically joins our, the whole body, right? So it joins the whole body and allows us in the movement. So that was about the bone. So it provides basically the framework, right? So the bone basically provides the framework of our body. Then the next one is the ligament. Now what are these ligaments? This is tissue. Okay, this is a tissue which is very elastic. It has considerable strength. So ligaments contains very little matrix. Now let me tell you what is matrix. Matrix basically means the material. So I forgot to say you all before that bone has a hard matrix, means hard material that is composed of the calcium and the phosphorus compounds. Okay, and the ligament has a very little matrix. It does not have more material in it, so it has less material in it. So the next one is, so the ligament basically joins two bones. So it joins the bone and bone. Okay, now the next one is tendon. Now what is tendon? Tendon are fibrous tissue with great strength but limited flexibility. So tendon is not that flexible, but it has a great strength. Okay, so now what does tendon do? It basically joins the muscles and the bones. Okay, so it joins the muscles and the bones. The next type of the connective tissue is the cartilage. Now cartilage has widely spaced cells, means that they have large intercellular space. Okay, the solid matrix is composed of proteins and sugars. So by this we can know that the cartilage also has a solid matrix. That means a solid material, same as the bone. Now that matrix is composed of what? Of course, the proteins and sugars. Now cartilage smoothens bone surfaces at joints. Okay, so you can see here, right here, cartilage, what it does, it is located near the surface of the joints, nose, ear and trachea. Okay, now the second last is the areolar tissue. Now let me tell you about the areolar tissue. Areolar connective tissue is found between the skin and the muscles, around blood vessels and nerves, and in the bone marrow. It fills the space inside the organs, supports the internal organs and help in the repair of tissue. So this was the function of the areolar tissue. Okay, now the last type of connective tissue, that is the adipose tissue. Okay, now what does this adipose actually do? Now let me tell you that the cell of this, that means the adipose tissue, are filled with the fat globules. Storage of fat also lets it act as an insulator. So what does this adipose basically do? It basically store fat under or below the skin. Okay, so because of this adipose tissue we get fatter and fatter day by day, right? So especially in this lockdown, obviously everyone, but not those who do a regular exercise. So make sure you do exercise, that's main important in this lockdown. Okay, so eat well, no problem, stay home, stay safe, but make sure that you also do some exercise. Okay, now these are the diagrams that I showed you earlier for the blood cells. So now I have got some question answers or QAs of this lesson. Okay, so we move on to it. So this is basically the chapter 6, tissues of biology, class 9. So the first question is, what is a tissue? Obviously we all know that a group of similar cells that work together to achieve a particular function. Okay, to achieve a particular function is known as tissue. So hope you understand that. Now if you want the if you want to take printout of this, you can take a snapshot right here, or I will give the copy down in the description as I reach 100 likes on this video, including also the plant tissue, that's the previous tutorial. Okay, so make sure you like this tutorial and also the previous tutorial. If you haven't watched it, go watch it right now. The link I will give it right here in the I button at the top right, or also in the description if I remember. Really, I get forget things. So the second question is, what are the different types of plant tissues? So based on the dividing capacity, plant tissue are broadly divided into two types. The first one is the meristematic tissue and the second is the permanent tissue. So in this Q question answers, I also added the question answers of the plant tissue as you're seeing right here. So based on the dividing capacity, the plant tissue are broadly divided into two types, meristematic tissue and the plant tissue. Now the third question is, what are meristematic tissue? How are they classified? Right? So the meristematic tissues are undifferentiated, actively dividing tissues seen only in the growing region of plants. Based on the region where they are present, these tissues are classified as apical meristem, lateral meristem and intercalary meristem. Now if you haven't watched the previous tutorial of the plant tissue, make sure to go and watch it, because until you watch that tutorial and you understand about the plant tissue, you are not going to understand about the question answers of it. So make sure you go and watch that tutorial. So this was the first third. Now we go on to the second slide. So now the fourth question is, what are permanent tissues? So the answer is, meristematic tissue take up a specific role and lose the ability to divide and forms another form of tissue. Now this is known as permanent tissue. Okay, so how does this meristematic tissue so what are these permanent tissues? They are basically the meristematic tissues which stop growing, so they change into permanent tissues. Now there comes another scientific name, that's differentiation. Okay, the differentiation is basically the process from when the meristematic tissues changes into permanent tissues, or the meristematic tissues take permanent shape, size and function. Okay, so now the fifth question is that What is differentiation? The process by which cells of the meristematic tissue lose its ability to divide and convert themselves into a permanent tissue by taking a fixed shape, size, and function is called differentiation. Okay, so I hope you have understood what's differentiation. Now the sixth question is, name different types of permanent tissue. So the first type is simple permanent tissue and the second is complex permanent tissues. Okay, now the seventh question is, name different types of simple permanent tissue. So as we know that there are three types of simple permanent tissues. Okay, that is parenchyma, collenchyma, and sclerenchyma. And again, parenchyma is divided into two types, that is the arenchyma and the chlorenchyma. Not collenchyma but chlorenchyma. Okay, but here they asked only the different types, means the major types, so I just gave these three. Okay, now which tissue makes up the husk of the coconut? That's obviously the sclerenchyma, because the cells of this is completely dead. Okay, so name the component of phloem. So there are four components. Okay, the phloem is made up of four components. The first one, sieve tubes. The second, companion cells. The third, phloem parenchyma, and the third one, phloem parenchyma, and the fourth one is phloem fibers. Okay, so now we move to the last slide, that is name the components of xylem. Now xylem consists of four components, as we know that. If you haven't watched that tutorial, you may be not knowing, so make sure to go and watch that. Okay, so the first type is tracheids, second one vessels, third xylem parenchyma, and the fourth xylem fibers. Okay, now the 11th question is, name the tissue responsible for the movement in our body. Now you can tell this answer without seeing to the question. That is obviously the muscular tissue. Okay, so the muscle tissue is responsible for the movement of our body. Now what are the functions of areolar tissue? As I said earlier, the parenchyma is divided into two types, that's the arenchyma. This is the areolar tissue. I just saw it like arenchyma. I'm sorry for that. So the answer is, areolar tissue is a connective tissue that is the space inside the organs and supports internal organs and helps in the repair of tissues. It is found between the skin and the muscles, around blood vessels and nerves, and in the bone marrow. So the bone marrow consists of the areolar tissue. So the last question but not the least is, name the following. There are 5 here. So the tissue that forms the lining of our mouth, that's obviously the epithelial tissue. So tissues that connect muscle to bone in humans, tendon. Third one, tissue that transport food in plants, that's obviously very easy, phloem. Okay, the next one is tissue that stores fat in our body, that's the adipose tissue. That is why we need to do a lot of exercise to remove the fat. Okay, now this adipose tissue basically stores fat between our skin, means below our skin. Okay, so that is why when we get sweat, it's on our skin. Yeah, so the last question, the last name the following is EBIT. So that's the connective tissue with a fluid matrix. Now what is matrix? As I said you earlier, that matrix means material, so a fluid material in tissues present in the brain. So the connective tissue which consists of fluid matrix is only one, that's the blood, of course, which is a very important tissue. Okay, which is a very important connective tissue. So in tissue is in the brain, the questions may be like in the brain or in this, in that. It's just to confuse you, but when you see a connective tissue with a fluid matrix, just say that's blood. Okay, so here the answer is blood. So guys, for this tutorial only this much. So guys, before stopping or before like closing this tutorial, please make sure to like, share and subscribe. Okay, this really motivates me to make more and more tutorials, especially for you guys, because I make tutorials to tell you all that I know, because I feel that if I know anything, obviously the other people should know that. So basically I make tutorials only for that. So guys, please make sure to like, share and subscribe, and also ring the bell icon to get my latest tutorials first. So guys, make sure to watch the previous tutorial about the plant tissue. So by watching that and this tutorial, you will complete the whole chapter tissue. Okay, so make sure to watch that. So guys, thanks for watching. So let's meet in our next tutorial. So until the next tutorial, bye, see ya.